can start the game while I'm at it. So I restarted the game.
See something. Pressing my finger.
Even if it's just a black screen.
Loading
And
video for me.
we are black screen. We're back.
Good.
Little icon.
See your Windows icon loading.
Apologies for the hiccup, everyone. Had a very little problem getting OBS and Twitch to play nicely with us. But we are back, and we will get right back to watching Richard glory in killing one foe and then immediately getting bludgeoned.
I have...
Richard, where are you located?
I'm in Oklahoma.
Okay, well, you have really high pings. It looks like there's a lot of European servers. If you click server has players in the filter, that might help. If you click that and then do a refresh.
This one looks like it might work.
Click on the filter.
I have I have.
Oh, okay.
I have a KD of 2.7. Just so, I mean, I'm doing pretty good.
And then refresh all once you.
And the one match that I played, I managed to kill 2 people. All the squads are full. I'll start my own squad.
So, for those of us who are just joining us, if you may have missed the beginning of the stream before that brief interlude, we are playing War of the Vikings from Paradox Interactive and Fat Shark with producer Gordon Van Dyke. Gordon, how would you assess Richard's performance as a complete neophyte? Neophyte Viking.
Actually, he's doing quite well. The main thing is understanding the concept of what's happening, and he seems to grasp that, switching to his secondary weapons, which is a throwing axe on the locked class on the the base warrior, and moving around to those. I mean, there's a lot going on, a lot to take in, and so it just takes time and experience.
Wow.
You start. It sounds weird, but you build muscle memory in this game, and you start to kind of react intuitively. Kind of like a lot of people do with shooters. I mean, all shooters share the same base core systems to do things, and then you have to relearn, like maybe sometimes somebody changes where the crouch button is or changes how you sprint. So you have to more learn the nuance elements of it, where this, if you're coming into this for the first time and green to these kinds of games, it's almost a complete brand new learning of how to play, a multiplayer game and experience this melee combat. Because, like you said, we have given a lot of options for control over how you attack. You choose left or right, and you'll start to get better and better at that. You'll notice your environment around you. You'll see a teammate on your on the right side of you, so you'll swing with a left-hand attack instead of a right-hand attack. Or you'll be in a tight space that's narrow, or you have 2 friends on either side of you, so you'll do an overhead attack instead. And you start to kind of learn these things, and it just starts to become part of the experience, just like it is with a shooter, and throwing yourself into to the iron sight view to get that extra precision in your aim. All those things start to become intuitive in the same way.
Now, Gordon, your background is in online shooters. You were a designer on Battlefield 2142, and you continued to work on the Battlefield series for a while before you left for Paradox Interactive a few years ago. How did your experience in shooter design influence how you worked with Fat Shark on War of the Vikings?
I think, it's a massive factor in how, working on those, kind of trying to just make sure that our design, made sense and it was synced, and we have, and we have a common thread throughout the design experience. But the guys at Fat Shark are also extremely talented, a lot of guys with a lot of experience, some guys a little bit more junior, but with a great foundation to start with. And so, I would say it absolutely had a massive influence. on everything. I would say some of the big things is some of the more background things that people forget about, or that aren't as obvious, like how we're going to set up our servers. Do we use dedicated? Do we use peer-to-peer? And looking into those things that aren't as sexy and exotic, but also extremely important. Just as important as everything else. Sometimes more important in some ways.
Why do you say more important?
Well, because there's a lot of background things running that make the shiny, sexy things possible. So it's just like a the car's engine by itself exposed isn't really a sexy thing, but you wrap a Ferrari shell around it, then you're like, hot. None of that's hot and sexy. And it's the kind of same thing about the game. It's the background engine. It's the way our game calculates the attacks and the hits, and how interrupts work, and how the exact precision of the weapons, the types of animations that they're going to be able to do, the time it takes to parry, all those kind of nuanced things in the background that all kind of come together into the final experience of the game.
Now,
I don't know if that makes sense, but
no, it makes complete sense. And you've been talking about like sort of the considerations that you need to think about combat-wise, the way these characters move, the way they behave when you're in control of them. But I'm also curious about the maps themselves. What are the things that you need to think about when you're designing maps that people are going to be traveling a little bit more slowly, that they're going to be bludgeoning each other in this more precise, methodical way? What do you need to think about when designing these multiplayer maps as opposed to a shooter map?
Well, I would say one main thing is there's a key difference in design philosophy, like the core design philosophy in shooters versus a melee-focused game. No matter what the melee-focused game is, we want everybody as close together as possible in these massive brawls, whereas shooter games do everything that they can to spread their opponents apart, to reduce the engagements between each other. One, because of the fact that they run things at 15 frames per second. The more people you got together in a closer area, the more the server would have a hard time keeping up with that amount of interactions and that amount of time. So basically, when a server is communicating to people, they're communicating every other person in that eye shot of them, or that is interacting with them. So a shooter game, you usually you don't want more than 3 or 4 people interacting with each other at once, and our game can have up to 24 people. So it's kind of a crazy scenario to put ourselves in. So that's like a major key philosophy that defines those two kinds of games from each other. And sadly, after I got into that tangent, I forgot the exact main purpose of that question. What the question was.
This would be a good time for me to point out that my kill-death ratio went from 2.7 to 3.6. So I'm getting better.
Nice.
Steady improvement. Yeah, Richard.
So what happened was then you got knocked down, you got revived then, I'm assuming.
Probably. No, it didn't. No, I'm saying between matches.
Okay.
Went from 2
well,
kills
here's
to 3.
That kind of does lead into a kind of interesting thing. On this, you're playing team deathmatch right now. So if you get knocked down, or you knock down an opponent, there's 2 different states that you can defeat somebody in. You can either knock them down or instant kill them. Which means, and so a knockdown state, they can be revived by a teammate. And then they won't count as a point in team deathmatch unless you finish them off.
Yes.
So you can just hit them a couple times. They have 50 hit points, and you can finish them off while they're knocked down. So if you get, and it also affects your kill death ratio. So you'll have that knockdown removed. You won't be counted as a death. But the person who knocked you down still gets that point, even if you get revived. So we don't take that from that player, because they kind of felt it didn't feel good to not, at least because it does take a lot of work to knock somebody down, and it felt more fair to take away the death from that player since they didn't die, but still keep the K, because that could stand for knockdown or kill, right?
Yeah.
So.
I have a new class. Look at this guy. Got an axe.
Yeah, that one, it takes more precision. But the two-handed axe can be super brutal, and you lose the ability to have a shield to really help deflect against rain.
Oh, that's going to be a problem for me.
So you're a bit more exposed. So you have to use the parry system that you learned. Yeah, that you learned in the tutorial. It's still a problem for me. I'm just not fast enough. I'm too old. Like those things, just like they fall apart on me. So I basically, when I pick that guy, I just go around like a complete maniac. And I just try and kill everybody. And I try to. If you notice when you start pull your swing, there's a little bar that comes up that has like multiple colors.
Mm-hmm.
Once you get it into the red, that thing is a beast, and you can get one-hit kills. There you go.
Gordon, a little question from the chat here from Aaron Wen. When do we get female faces in the game?
She is actually a super active and awesome member of our community, and now it's almost like she's trolling me to get an answer, but we'll have more information about that later. I'm not going to reveal that yet.
Not going to reveal that
Can you get that one?
It's going to happen, though.
You should find the one woman from Game of Thrones, the female knight, who's just a total badass.
And map her face right in there.
We're working on those assets. So, I mean, everything takes time. We're a tiny, tiny team, probably who took on way more than we should have. So we're like, there's 13 guys on the dev team. That doesn't include me. So there's 13 guys that, they're working in the engine, on the game, creating the content, doing the code, doing the art, doing the level design, doing the tweaking of the gameplay mechanics. And that's a huge task. I mean, our team is amazing. It's like, I know everybody probably says that about their team, but, what they've been able to pull off, I'm seriously, sometimes I just sit back and I play this on the weekend just for fun, and I'm just blown away at what we've been able to accomplish. And pull off and create a game that kind of rivals AAA quality. I mean, we're not at that level, but, if you look at our team size, and I've talked to my friends in the industry, and they're like, "Oh, what are you working on?" "Oh, that game looks awesome." And then they're like, "Oh, I'll ask them, or it'll come up just amongst the conversation, and they'll wonder about the team size, and they usually guess 70 people. But of course, they're used to working on bigger budgets. I'm like 13 people, and they almost think that I'm lying to them. So. I mean, that speaks, a lot to our team and just how hard they work on this. And
Did I just break that guy's shield?
Yes.
Wow.
So there's two ways that you can break a shield. One, throwing a javelin into it, or two, another way is that I believe if you do a special, you'll break it. And another way is if you shoot flaming arrows. You can get flaming arrows as a perk once you've unlocked the skirmisher customization. And if you get 2 arrows into the wooden shield, it'll break. But if you shoot into somebody's flesh with a flaming arrow, the flame goes out. So it's actually a really genius way to implement flaming arrows, since they're so cool, but not have them create a weird gameplay element where you have bleed effects and things like that. Because then it becomes hard, and then you have people going into like your river or the water in your levels and trying to dip in there and put out the flame, and then we have to take that into consideration and try and make that work. So as you can see, there's a lot of trouble behind that. But the team did a clever way. And then stamina. If you lose all your stamina, you'll drop your shield, but you can actually pick it back up.
Gordon, another question from the chat here. The Cat's Jaguar is wondering, how does friendly fire work? I know that like when you're in these close quarters.
I'll tell you right now, I've learned already. It works exactly like it would. If I hit someone with an axe, he gets hurt.
Yeah, that's pretty much. You kind of hit it right on the head. It's we left that on, and we actually started causing people to lose some XP points. But if you're doing really badly, we won't take you down to the negative. But it is something to try and deter that. It feels like, I mean, we're trying to create some form of we want the people to be in a scenario where they have to think about what they're doing. We don't want people to swing wildly and haphazardly without any like thought behind what it is they're doing. Now, of course, there's always going to be mistakes, and that'll happen. But we only take away XP based on how much damage.
Oh, dang!
And I believe most of the time we're not doing 100% damage reflection. I think we're reducing that to some degree, but don't quote me because we change those things all the time. Because in early access, our goal has been to tweak things and to experiment with things to find the right answer.
Yeah, that's a tricky thing. I mean, you want there to be a negative feedback that is also netting you a positive ultimately.
Yeah.
Like you want to create a penalty that teaches people to play better, and that seems like it's a tricky process.
Yeah, it's really tricky, and I'm sure we haven't nailed it, exactly how it should be, and that's a nice thing. Is like, but we got the core system down. I think we're much more confident within the core element of this combat system than we might have been with War of the Roses. And so I feel like we're at a point where it's about the nuanced tuning. So we can make these small changes that aren't going to have this overall drastic negative result on the game after we've released it.
Yeah. Oh, that was glorious. Oh, man, I just murdered 2 people in a row. Yeah, I forgot about the special move until about 3 minutes ago.
It's hard to hit, though. I mean,
it's hard.
Yeah, it's like, sorry, I went ooh to the stream, which is probably, it's delayed, so that was an inappropriate ooh. Or an out of context ooh. But yeah, it's, I did see the attack you got, and that was a really good timing. It's really, I think it's really effective when you catch somebody off guard, when they don't see you approaching, or their focus is so heavily on the target in front of them or what they're trying to do that they kind of almost just ignore you in a way that's beneficial to yourself. But against a skilled player, just going straight up to them, unless they just completely just like, they kind of forget what they're doing, you're never going to get them with a special move. It is about catching them off guard. And that's the point of it as well. Because one of the things that was really frustrating in War of the Roses was if you got the drop on someone,
running away,
that never ever would give you the advantage of winning in that fight, because it's like these guys, a lot of the guys were so skilled, it's like you would hit them, you would do a little bit of damage, they would turn around and just kick the crap out of you. And that's what happened a lot to me, and that's really frustrating to all players. So whenever you get the drop on someone, you should almost be guaranteed to win that scenario. And there's times I miss. I mean, there's times I'll get up behind somebody, they'll have no clue that I'm right behind them about to try and do a special, and they'll move just slightly to the left or right or forward a little, and that's
pretty funny.
Just enough where I miss them, and you're just like, oh! But you know why. You know why you missed them. And so there's, it's kind of like a beautiful system, and it's like a crown of thorns sometimes.
Another question from the chat here from Wayland X. Now, obviously, given the size of Fat Shark, this is a very long-term question. Oof. But War of the Vikings is PC only now. But are there plans for other platforms? Do you guys want to go to Linux? Do you want to go to Mac? Do you want to dare we dream consoles at some point?
We've been investigating it. So the engine that we've built this game on top of is called BitSquid, and they've implemented console support. And I know for a fact, like a game called Helldivers by Arrowhead Studios, the guys that made Magicka, they're developing a game for Sony. And and they're using the BitSquid engine, so it clearly has support for that. So we've done some investigating and found that it would be possible, but we haven't put anything in plans yet. So I would say that if we're going to do anything, we would look at putting those efforts into console versus going to Linux or Mac OS. Right. Mostly because most Mac OS users that want to play games like this, typically they have a powerful Mac, and they're dual booting, and then they have a standard PC configuration for inputs, which is a keyboard and mouse.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas Mac, they're typically trying to move away from a keyboard and mouse input system, and they push more things like Magic Trackpad and touchpads and stuff. And it's like, and I'm a big Mac user myself, and at home, my wife, she plays on our iMac, which is pretty powerful, and she dual boots into Windows.
I won. It's the first time I won.
And I built a super powerful PC-only computer, but it's like, that we feel like that our target audience, they're primarily PC players. And I know that that's not always the true, but like again, being that we are limited on resources, we really have to try and choose the things that are going to have the biggest impact. And it does. There are so many variables when you go into Linux or when you go into Mac OS, that the same challenges we face on PC, where you have a variety of different hardware and stuff like that. So the reason I say console isn't because we prefer console, but it's more that, okay, you have a standard hardware, and that makes it more realistic to do with a smaller amount of resources.
Ooh. Oh, now we've got a bow and arrow guy.
You have a bow and arrow guy.
Yeah.
You're going to try out some ranged options.
I've had feedback from some people that, and of course, I'm biased, but I've had other people that never worked on the game say that they feel like we have some of the best archery in any multiplayer game that they've played.
Archery is having something of a renaissance in video games, I think. Last year, 2013 was kind of the year of the bow and arrow. You had, Crysis 3. What's Crysis 3's big innovation? He's got a bow and arrow.
Right.
Tomb Raider. It's Lara Croft's reboot. What's different this time? She wears pants and has a bow and arrow. So what's the secret to archery? How do you make it feel really nice?
Well, I think the big thing that we did was we bring it into more of a traditional first-person perspective, and I would say it's how the projectile moves through the space, and and how it hits, and being able to learn that ability, and the sound effects. A lot of it has to, it's making the sound effects really good, and just making sure that your arrow travels through.
Well, yeah,
how you would feel like it does.
The sound of the arrows just kind of plinking around or whipping by you is actually pretty nerve-wracking. And then, as you can see, people just filling my corpse with arrows from a distance.
And also, it's how fast does it snap to it, and also I think another nice thing about the way we've done it was more what's a penalty that we can give to them that doesn't make archery just so much more dominant, because having that distance and being able to attack from a distance when a lot of your opponents might have only a sword and not have that ability to attack at a range from your opponent is. So we brought them in also into that first person view so that they lost their kind of peripheral aspect and couldn't see around them. So it's easy for an enemy to kind of sneak up and flank you, get up on your side, and then just take you out.
I am not good at archery. I've decided.
You miss your axe, is what you're saying?
I kind of do.
Another thing we focused on when we were watching is when should you be able to let your arrow loose, and it's and then also the power meter. It's timing that so that it felt right, and trying to make sure that the visual cues of your bow, which you see more perfectly, kind of match up, making sure there's a sound effect when you've pulled it back that kind of helps indicate when you've reached the max power limit. All those little nuance things, I think, all kind of together, wrapped up in one package, is really what kind of helps set our archery apart. I almost think that everything's designed around the third person element. And we tried looking at first person from the sword perspective, but it didn't work. It was really it kind of broke all of our physics and our animation states, and it it just didn't feel good at all. But luckily for archery, it did, because again you're shooting a projectile.
Yeah.
It's different than having like a physical encounter with another person with a weapon in your hand that doesn't ever leave your body.
Right. Oh. Yep. Okay. There's someone who killed me while I was aiming.
Yeah, and to the audio cues, when I noticed Erwin, she mentioned that they're also on the melee weapons as well. So as you're pulling back, you hear kind of like a shinging sound, like shing, and then when you hear it get to that higher pitched sound, you're much closer to doing a full power attack. And those things, the beautiful thing about those is that they're very just kind of like, they just happen. Most players don't even notice that those sounds are even there, but they start to learn them just intuitively, and they become a part of the experience and keeping that immersion. And we try to do that as much as possible with UI. It generally tries to be to back it up, or try not to have the UI at all, because UI kind of steals from immersion. So we try to be smart with when that does and doesn't show up. And that's not an exact science, unfortunately. So it is a lot of us trying to just
this
guess.
poor guy. He's just surrounded.
Oh, you didn't revive your teammate.
Wait, no, I'm reviving one right now.
I'm on delay. I'm seeing you in the past, buddy.
Well, I've learned.
You're seeing his past mistakes.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
I've learned in those 7 seconds.
I'm judging the old you.
Gordon, this is, now, correct me if I'm wrong, this is the third online game made by Fat Shark in the past 5 years, yes?
Yes.
Third or fourth?
The third.
Third, and it's Lead and Gold, War of the Roses, War of the Vikings.
Yeah.
Now, how would you say Fat Shark has changed the most as a developer in that time?
I think we've we're a really close-knit team, so it's not the traditional publisher-developer kind of relationship.
Yeah, that's why
I'm at the office every day, typically, sitting down, and we all, participate in the morning scrum. I let the team know what I'm doing, and that, they talk about what they're doing with everyone. So it's like, I would say that one thing that, when you are on such a smaller budget and you have a game that is highly ambitious, sometimes you make the right choice at the moment, but it's maybe the wrong choice long term. So I think we've gotten a lot better at, trying to make the right choices for long term, as opposed to, the right choices just to solve a problem. So, and looking at that, because what ends up happening is when you make too many of those, your game becomes riddled with legacy debt, as they call it. And, and then when you want to go in and improve something or build on it, that can actually hinder that or stop it or cause you to have to rewrite everything. So I think we've gotten much, much better at that. And we still have a long ways to go, but also trying to work harder on improving our server performance, which is hard because a lot of our programmers, that's not their area of expertise, but they do an awesome job for it not being where their core knowledge is. That's not their strength. So it would be kind of like having Michael Phelps running, the 500 meter.
This is sort of an amazing skirmish going around me. Like, I've been dead, or I've been on the ground for about a minute and a half, just waiting for someone to revive me, and everyone is too busy killing each other around me to even try.
This is
sometimes you feel ignored. I hate that, being in that position. I'm like, but look, you just had that moment where you could have revived me, and no. And then somebody kills me. Or throws a throwing weapon. I like to use throwing weapons, actually, a lot to finish off other people. Because you really don't want them to get revived. It's not as valuable in Conquest to finish off your opponents, but I want that XP boost, and I like that person knowing that I just completely finished them. It's like, I don't know, maybe it's just kind of the jerk part of me.
No, I see the appeal.
But now we have other game modes. So the game has like 4 game modes. 2 of them are a bit similar. There's pitched battle and pitched arena, or whatever we've decided to call it. It changes all the time. But arena we'll just go with. So arena is like up to 16 players, and it's on maps about this size and a little bit smaller as well. And that's like one life, kind of Counter-Strike esque, where once you die, you're done. But that's when knockdowns become much more critical. And there's even a perk where if you don't get revived within a certain amount of time, you'll auto revive yourself.
Oh, that's cool.
And so that's a real like game mode specific perk that could be extremely valuable. And that's when it also becomes extremely valuable to finish off your opponent if you only defeated them to a knockdown and not an insta-kill. So knockdowns become a big part of the strategy in different game modes, depending on the game mode. It's not as obviously critical as if you only have that one life, and your goal is to defeat all the opponents on the other team. But since it counts as points in team deathmatch, it can be the big difference.
Right.
Especially if you're playing like a competitive match, and you're down to the next kill wins, and you get somebody in a knockdown state, but you don't finish them off, and they get one of your guys and finish them off, or get an insta kill, then they'll take the win.
Oof. Oh, these guys are murdering me pretty bad this round. Well, I, for one, am very much enjoying this.
You're really, you're taking to this really well. I mean, it's delayed, but I saw you do a parry, and those are complex things to kind of to learn, and it's nice for me to see new players, because it gives you a perspective in your game that sometimes you start to forget about those challenges because you've been playing so that you kind of just overlook them, just because that's what humans do. You start to kind of look past the flaws because you're in love with your product.
Now, Richard, would you say that your early success is due to the fact that you hate Vikings? Is that what's fueling your
I've been
battle?
auto joining, and it's just putting me in the Saxons. But I think what it really is I don't know. I mean, I know that you may not have watched all of these streams before, but I am very good at video games.
Oh, that's true. Yes, Richard is very good at video games. The best.
I'm just following this guy. Oh, there's a ladder? Let's see where this goes.
Now, you were telling us a little bit earlier, Gordon, before the stream started proper, that the thing that is absent from this version of the game that Richard is playing is a couple of different maps, right?
Yeah, so we haven't really officially come out and said this, but there are going to be 4 additional maps that the game is going to release with. And there's going to be 4 larger maps that will support Conquest and Team Deathmatch. And then we'll break off sections of those that will give it an ability to run Arena on it as well. And there's a couple other bigger maps that people played already, and versions of Arena that we haven't really played that much that will be made available as well. But the new maps are much more drastically visually different than these ones. Especially this one, it's a medium-sized map that you play Arena and Team Deathmatch on. And it's basically up in we imagine this to be up into the northern parts of Norway or Iceland, where it's just basically ice and snow everywhere. And it's a pretty awesome map. It's a little bit, over the top, but, these are video games. We want to make the uncommon common, and we want to make it an extraordinary experience.
Well, I like that. You've said before about this game in interviews that historical accuracy isn't necessarily what you're going for. You're going for a historically inspired feel, right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we're heavily inspired. We want to always keep things factual. We're not going to have fantasy elements to our game or magic or our characters will never have mana as a some type of element that they have to restore.
There won't be dragon shouting, is what you're telling me at any point.
No. But we try to think of things because there isn't a huge amount of evidence for us to kind of draw from. Whereas in the 15th century with War of the Roses, there's a much bigger amount of evidence. So we kind of think. I mean, they were no less creative, no less twisted, no less perverted, no less angry than we are now as a society. But the technology available to them was different. Is the main thing that separates them from us. So it's like if it was possible in their time period with the technology they had, there's no reason to think that their imagination wouldn't, have come up with these. And recycling, even though it's new to us modern times, it was very important back in these time periods because they're limited on the steel. So another reason that you don't find evidence of a lot of these things is because they recycled it. They broke something down and they reforged it into a new sword. They took that steel.
Oh.
I don't think that this is too much of a spoiler, but just just like in Game of Thrones season 4 season premiere. You reforged, you melted things down and reused that steel because it was expensive and it wasn't widely available.
I'm imagining like Viking mom. Like, are you going to throw that perfectly good sword away?
Exactly.
That is still good steel,
we can
darling.
still use that.
You bring that back in here. We need to make new arrows.
You raised in Sweden?
Exactly. That's it. I mean, I'm pretty sure that actually probably happened. There was a conversation not too far off from that would have taken place. I mean, and that's what it was. I mean, it was like, you reused stuff as many times as you possibly could. You repurposed it. They didn't have the luxury of abundance of goods that we have now that we're kind of slowly losing as well. So, you're starting to see more recycling and that's what happened in that time period. So that made it even harder for us, I think, to find evidence. So, but we'll always keep it in that fundamental space. We also don't add like, oh, you get a +5 damage on this weapon. All the weapons do the same amount of damage. It's the skill of the person holding it, which is true to that time period. They didn't have a sword and go, oh, right, I got +5 damage on my sword here. This is going to be awesome. I'm totally going to kick ass in this next raid. So it was like, we didn't want that. We didn't want that. And to me, that's a fantasy element.
Okay, that dude's head just got cut off.
Yeah, we have decapitation. This is also a much gorier game as well, which fits into this time period. A lot of the times in the 15th century, it was more about just to just disable your opponent. You weren't as worried about killing them. You're also like more likely to ransom them, and get some money out of it. But in this time period, it was about attrition. It was like you killed, and you just look at the Norse culture. The honorable way to die was with your sword in your hand, and if you didn't die with your sword in your hand, that was the worst thing ever. It wasn't if you died with sin; it was if you didn't die with your sword in your hand. So it's like they wanted to go to Valhalla. So that kind of that gave us a reason why we wanted to we should add a bit more gore. We have blood effects that splatter onto the objects around you, and you actually start the longer you live. Richard hasn't given us an exact example of that, but sorry, I had to take that shot.
That's fine.
But you'll start to get blood on your weapons and your hands and on your back, and you start to become drenched. So you can see a little bit of it right now on the back of the chainmail. Or sorry, I'm in the past, but I guess I'm current with where the game was, right?
Yeah.
Maybe not. So, anyways, you'll see that build up, and you can customize the different colors of your gear. So like there's a screenshot that's pretty funny on in our Steam hub. Where a guy posted, it's like something about, how am I going to get these stains out? And he had white sleeves, and he's holding his arms up, and he's got it's like blood all over it. So it's kind of funny in a kind of morbid way. But yeah, I mean, so those are a lot of the things that we've added that that we've added into this to fit the lore. We really try to think about that. We try not to kind of steer away from the lore, and we want everything to kind of tie into that time period in some way if possible. Now, like when you earn loot, it's like, okay, your goal, more so on the Viking side, was you're there to get money, and you bought your own gear, and that's why we have that gear system the way it is. It all was inspired, not because we wanted an unlock system, but it was great that we got one out of that. Because it fits into the lore, it makes sense. I think it makes less sense for shooters. Like, you don't have, when you're in the army, and my brother is in the army, it's like you were given your gear and that's all you got.
Right.
You didn't get to go, I would really like a red, a red hologram for my scope, please.
Yeah, you don't get a new rank and all of a sudden you're like, well, here are your new items that you can have access to.
Congratulations, soldier! You've really earned this ACOG. It's just for you.
In this time period, it actually kind of ties better in with the lore. It's like okay, here I am. It's like I've been playing a long time, and in theory, my guys lived through a lot of battles, right? And it's like so. You get to buy the fancier gear, and it doesn't give you an advantage. The advantage is already that you've been around and played the game long enough to be able to afford that. And another thing, like we did you can change your beards and your facial hair. So one of the key things on that is that only at level 60, which is the max level that you can XP level up to, then you can pick the gray beard. But you can't pick the gray beard until you're level 60. That's only for those guys that have
That's pretty cool.
lived
I love that. I love the idea of like a legitimate sign of age being the signal of rank. Like not some like flashy like piece of armor, not some flashy axe or something. It's you're old. You have survived. That's great.
Yeah. You've lived long enough you can actually achieve and unlock gray hair.
Wayland X in the chat is curious if there will be siege weaponry. Now, I understand that, given that the point of the game is this up-close and personal combat, that siege weaponry probably wouldn't have as much use as it would be unless you were, trying to conquer a fort. But have you guys thought about that for different game modes or anything of the sort?
Yeah, no, that's actually come into thought a little bit more. The key thing, though, was with this time period, there's not a lot of evidence about that, and it's really kind of frustrating. But I did a lot of investigating and research, and one of the cool things that I found was that there's a lot of wooden castles before they started using stone, which is more in tune with the Viking age. And actually, Bamborough Castle, which is connected with War of the Roses, was at one point a wooden castle from what the evidence they could gather, and the Vikings actually destroyed the original Bamborough Castle, which ties into War of the Roses. The Vikings also founded what eventually turned into York, and it was called something very similar to that in the Norse language, but I have a crappy time pronouncing that because I'm full American when it comes to that aspect of my life. But it was like that. Like there is so much tie-in into War of the Roses, and we actually looked at should we do that. Like one of the original working titles was War of the Roses Blood Eagle, but quickly we realized that we had to make a lot of fundamental changes to this game to really bring the Viking Age kind of combat to life, and that's why we decided to kind of change it, but kind of we wanted there to be some connection. We wanted people to understand that this game shares some core elements with War of the Roses, but then again they are very different games.
Now,
so
Gordon,
the siege weapons back to the original thing is like I would love to have some wooden castles and to have some more crude type of siege things that trying to imagine what it is that they would use to accomplish that, because they the siege weapons that we have evidence for, when you're looking at stuff like Leonardo da Vinci's and stuff, I mean that's Renaissance era, that's way ahead of the technology that they had at that time. So we would have to really think about how they did that. But there is evidence of, especially when they attacked northern France, and when the Norwegian Vikings went up against the Franks that had a massive control over what's modern day France. They actually were having large battles that they arranged, and the Vikings had really great engineering and ideas behind doing proper warfare, at least as close as you could get to it.
Gordon, something you said in there that I don't want to gloss over, because I was going to ask before and I was like, you know what, no, maybe that's not a necessary tangent. But now that I know that Blood Eagle was originally going to be the name of this game, can you perform a Blood Eagle? And
No.
if you cannot perform a Blood Eagle, why can't you perform a Blood Eagle?
Well, it was more a form of torture, so it wasn't something that happened during battle. So that made it kind of hard, but there were... that thought did kind of go around the circle when we were initially planning out the game and setting the key pillars and really fleshing out how we wanted this game to be designed. Because when I found that term, when I was doing my research, I fell in love with it. I mean, just Blood Eagle. I mean, it's just such an awesome thing to say.
Can you explain? Now, I understand that this is probably something that not too many people have come across. Explain what a Blood Eagle is.
Well, they're not 100% sure, but it was basically a way of torturing your victim so that they had a very painful death. And basically what they did was from the way I've understood it, is that they would rip open your sternum, pull your lungs out, throw them over your shoulders, and throw salt into your wound, and then hang you by your hands and your feet, and have you hanging there. And the term Blood Eagle comes from the fact that the person's lungs would flap in the wind on their back.
Yeah. Vikings were not nice people.
But they're not 100% sure if that actually ever happened.
Right, that's like, that might be propaganda, right?
Exactly.
That might be a myth.
To make people more afraid of them than they probably already were, which seems kind of like seems like unnecessary, but it was a thing that maybe even to scare their own adversaries or other groups, that have were under different jarls and stuff like that. There is a poem. Which was another link back into kind of like a nod to War of the Roses. Was there's two poems that kind of talked about a Blood Eagle, and one of them happened supposedly in the town of York that the Vikings founded. So, there's a lot of these little nuanced connections back to roses that most people probably don't realize, because they are kind of subtle and more connected to with when I was doing initial research on making a Viking Age game.
Mm-hmm. Gordon, I'm very curious. I'm always interested in the idea of things that don't make it into a game, like an idea that sort of piques the interest of the developer, and then they try to implement it, but it doesn't necessarily make it in. And what Richard is playing right now is more or less close to what will be officially released on April 15th, correct?
Yeah, one of the main things that we wanted a better system to help facilitate formations so that people could make a shield wall, but we just didn't have the time, or we weren't sure how we could implement it. So it's something that I would like to revisit, and something that could always make it into the game in the future, especially if it's successful. We actually have like a 5-year high-level plan, or we've tried to stage the game to where there could be it could live for 5 years. We don't want to just ship and forget this game at all. But of course, it depends on the demand. Are people still playing? Are people still interested in this game, and and want us to continue to update it? So we'll just see where it goes from there. But that's something that I could say that could possibly make it in there. But it is the thing that we couldn't get in that I really wanted to have.
How do you find the audience for this type of game? You talk about, like, in the ideal, this thing lives for 5 years and you're supporting it that entire time, but getting it out there, vying for the attention of a multiplayer audience on PC is very, very difficult. How do you connect? How do you find that player?
I think we're still trying, to be honest. I mean, obviously, Paradox published Mountain Blade, so we had a very obvious channel to go to, but not all of them are interested in a game like this. Not all of them want this kind of experience. That's not what they're looking for. It does require a more modern PC than Warband and Mountain Blade requires. So it has been a struggle. I mean, it's as you can see in the server browser, it is still a game that people are finding, but it's the people that are kind of tired of FPSs, and they want something new, but they still want that high intensity of this multiplayer PvP experience. And they're maybe probably like 20 into the 50s. They're probably a bit more of a more mature audience than you get sometimes with FPSs.
Uh-oh. This is not going to go well. Oh my god!
So now I'm looking forward to seeing what's happening in your stream now. So it's like,
no, he's getting hunted down.
I thought I would be
God,
sneaking. I thought I was going to go steal one of their control points.
Oh yeah,
Maybe they weren't paying attention.
Richard, that literally is like the Battlefield horror when you turn around and there are 4 dudes bearing down on you. Oh no,
Yeah,
Richard's gonna get blood-eagled.
You're doing really, really well. I mean, it's not an easy game to jump in and do this well from being completely green to this game. So a lot of kudos. I'm enjoying watching you play. So
Well, I'm enjoying playing the game, so that's a bonus.
Now, one last question about support here. You're playing with a keyboard and mouse, right?
Yes.
yes.
And it's only keyboard and mouse right now, right?
Well, we have some limited controller support. I know we took it out because there were some crash bugs, and we're going to put it back in. I would actually... We've been so busy that I haven't followed up with the update on the status of that, but it will have controller support. And it actually plays quite well with the controller support. So that also makes it much easier for us to consider being on console, but that's a very costly expense, and this game really needs to prove itself. I think before you're going to see Paradox and invest the amount of money that it would take to go into being on a console, because there's a lot of things that we would also have to polish up. I mean, the console audience, they have a different expectation for games. I mean, I would say if I were to just, and I know that this is, bordering on the line of stereotype, and that isn't true for everyone. So I just want to get that out there before I make this comment. But PC players tend to really care more about gameplay and how well things work and their input device and the accuracy of it. That's why Corsair is able to sell mechanical keyboards and at a premium price and these things. And high optic mouses and laser mouses with adjustable DPI and stuff like that. Whereas console players, they really care about the visual quality of a game, and the quality of the interface and these things. Where PC players are a bit more forgiving on that. So we really would need to consider that if we went into that into that area.
That's really interesting to me, that you would need to think more about the aesthetic of the game and how people will interpret everything they see the moment they turn it on, rather than grokking some sort of central mechanic and determining whether they like it based on that on a console. It's an interesting observation. I wouldn't have thought of that.
Yeah, I think it has more to do with what they've been exposed to, not necessarily that they intentionally care about that more or less. Because of course, if the game it still needs to have a great gameplay and control. Like, if things aren't responding well on the controller, they're going to throw your game out the window.
Right.
But I think visuals still need to match that as well. They need to be closer. You can't have, you can't have the gap that you can get away with in PC market, because most of the time PC gamers tend to be extremely competitive as well. And a lot of times you go into all this trouble of creating these awesome dynamic shadows and all these amazing shaders and all these cool VFX, and then the PC gamer takes it and slides it all the way to the lowest settings so that they can max out their frames per second. So it's like, there are a lot of different agendas.
This is an interesting observation in the chat here. Owl K is saying that at this point, with console games, less games on consoles have single-player and offline modes than they used to, and sort of that is changing, that it's slowly getting to a point where console games come with a few more of the rough edges that are, just a natural byproduct of getting an online-centric game out the door and getting as many people playing it before you optimize it. Do you think that is changing right now? Like, do you think that console players' expectations are transforming?
Well, yeah, of course. As consoles are always catching up to PC. I mean, PC has the flexibility, which isn't always, it's their pro and their con at the same time, because also then it's harder for games because they have to account for such a wide variety of configurations and support, as the widest range of hardware specs from lowest to highest. But so now the consoles have kind of caught up. There's no way ever that the PS3 or the Xbox 360 would ever have been able to run this game. It's just absolutely impossible. It's not even to be considered. But now the newer ones. They're much closer to par with PCs where they're at right now. But of course, that's not going to last. That's a moment in time. So of course their expectations change, and as they say, they start to adopt the more online. So then you have the games like War Thunder, being a free-to-play game on the PS4. You have Titanfall, which is a multiplayer-only game on a big console, which you never would have seen on the previous ones. Or it would have been extremely shocking if you would have saw that. And I think those things have kind of they're always going to be playing catch up and adopting it as like what you see, on the PC that's becoming popular. It tends to take 5 to 10 years to come on to console. Just look how long first-person shooters took.
Yeah, a decade, really.
Yeah.
And with that, we're going to start wrapping up our hour here on Joystiq Streams. Now, anybody who's been watching and are in the East Coast of the United States and think to themselves, wow, I'm really liking what Fat Shark and Paradox are doing, Gordon's crew is going to be at PAX East this coming weekend. Isn't that right, Gordon?
Yeah, we're going to be at PAX East, actually. The booth looks freaking awesome, I just have to say. It's like every year, Paradox is kind of improving on, their presence at, press-specific events and consumer-specific events. So we're going to have 8 PCs up and running where people can check out and play War of the Vikings. We're also going to have Wizard Wars there and Europa Universalis 4. So we're giving them a wide spectrum of the different games that we have to offer, and we'll be running exclusively on the new map. So they'll kind of get a sneak peek at those before everybody else. So if you're going to be at PAX, please absolutely come and check us out, and I'll be there, so you can come and meet me and talk to me and ask me obscure questions or questions. And then sometimes I get really tired and I'm exhausted, and then you can squeeze extra information out of me that I might not said in a more controlled environment.
Joystiq will also be at PAX East in force, everyone. Speaking of people that are going to be tired and who you can press for all kinds of information. But it won't even be about games. It'll just be like personal stuff. Be like, this is the kind of things I like on pizza really in the morning. You don't really need to press us on those topics. But speaking of Joystiq's presence at PAX East, we are going to be on an absurd number of panels, and you should go to joystiq.com tomorrow. That's on Wednesday for a complete list of all the many panels we are going to be on. Joystiq.com is going to have all sorts of fun coverage from the show floor all throughout the weekend. And you can follow all that action on twitter.com/joystiq, facebook.com/joystiq, plus.google.com/+joystiq. You've probably observed a theme here. But yeah, everybody, please follow Paradox Interactive on Twitter as well to get more updates on War of the Vikings. And the game will be out officially. It'll be the full release War of the Vikings on
April 15th.
April 15th.
And also follow at War of the Vikings on Twitter as well.
At War of the Vikings. And Joystiq Streams broadcasts at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time every Tuesday and Thursday. And today we broadcast a little bit early just to rock out with our friends in Stockholm. Gordon, thank you so much for joining us today. This has been really awesome.
This is fun.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. And it's really fun to watch Richard just progress so fastly. I think we nailed it. I think I'm done. I'm done with... It's over.
No more video games.
And Richard, yeah, man, thank you so much for diving in fearlessly, like a true Saxon or Viking warlord.
That's right. I finally got to play as the Vikings in the very last game here.
right.
At the end. Well, you know what happens? Everybody rapid clicks on to join the Viking team, and then when you get into the Viking team, you always notice that there's a ton of people in the green squad because those are the guys that were spamming to join the Vikings.
Oh, that's funny.
You usually over click and then jump right into the green squad.
All right. Let's give us a nice title screen here. Well, this was a lot of fun.
A lot of fun.
Whoop-a-doop. All right, thanks for watching, everybody.
Thank you, everybody. We'll see you on Thursday, 4 p.m.
Thanks.